then I think you're halfway there. On top of that, I would say it's more of the sort of like problem-solving skills. And do you know what, Ray? Practical skills, being able to understand budgeting, cleaning, cooking, all of the things that we are supporting people to do in day-to-day life. If you don't know how to use a washing machine, how are you going to support somebody else to do it?
Yeah, it's interesting you've said that, because as an organisation, we don't really think about teaching people or thinking about giving people the opportunity to learn how to cook or how to do housework, and they're really practical skills that a lot of our staff need as well, aren't they? And we don't really think about that until we have these conversations. And how we might provide that.
Yeah, it's really important, especially I think sometimes when you've got a lot of younger people coming through. We had a young lady start one of our Stockport services, and the team leader there had to spend about the first few weeks, part of her induction, she actually included it in her induction, was how to use the washing machine appropriately, because she still lived at home and did a washing. So she'd actually never used a washing machine. Now she's in a house with 5 people with learning disabilities who probably knew more about using the washing machine than she did. But obviously part of her role was to support them on their laundry days. So we need. She's a great support worker, and now she's got those practical skills. She can use a washing machine. We give something back.
Fabulous. Okay. So aside from skills, so what behaviours, or sets of behaviours we need to see in an effective worker, or do you need to see in an effective worker?
Okay. So obviously respect. I suppose those behaviours that identify people's core values. People's use of language, being respectful to individuals, being non-judgmental. I suppose these are all values rather than behaviours. Being caring, so the use of language and how people are spoken to. That, I suppose, one of the being a social care worker is a really stressful job, and I don't think people understand how stressful that is. You're at the front line of all sorts of issues and incidents and experiences and things that happen, and your behaviour can dictate how they play out.
Sure.
So you need people who are calm, people who are patient, people who I suppose are very open and honest, that don't jump to conclusions and are mindful of what they're doing, I suppose.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these behaviours and these values that you're talking about, I automatically kind of equate them to sort of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So do you feel that staff need to have a certain level of emotional intelligence in order to be effective and have the right behaviours?
I think people need to have a high level of emotional intelligence. If we're talking about within any role, you get people who excel in that role, and you get people who do the job to a good standard, and that's a very, very different thing. Those people who excel in their role as health and social care support workers have high levels of emotional intelligence, because it is a very complex process to do. Some of the things that our support workers do about sort of reflecting in action, so they're reflecting about how they're behaving in a situation and the impact that's going to have on somebody else. So in some of our very complex services where we have individuals who have behaviours that challenge, you have to have a high level of emotional intelligence to pick up on that person's behaviours, to understand them, to understand why you have to behave in a certain way. It's very complex practice, more complex than lots of sort of casework social workers might do, because you're actually in it. You're not analysing it from afar. You're in it and having to reflect in practice, and that is a really difficult thing to do. So I do think for those workers that excel have high levels of emotional intelligence. I don't think we necessarily promote that as much as we should. because it's as, if not more important than academic intelligence to be effective in the role of a social care worker. And I think as an organisation we could probably promote that more, because people have this whole thing around academic intelligence being the sort of yardstick that we measure people by, but it isn't. It's not.
So talking about academic qualifications and the other side of knowledge. So what knowledge do you expect, or if you were recruiting somebody or you had a new member of staff, what knowledge would you expect them to have in order for them to be effective?
I honestly, genuinely believe that you can give people knowledge. We can train people to have the right knowledge. So at that point of recruitment, all of the things I've just talked about are way more important to me than the actual knowledge. You know, I don't need to know whether they understand moving and handling or safeguarding or health and safety in its academic form. Obviously, after that point, then I do need to know that people understand all of those sort of core areas of practice. And if we're talking about what makes an effective support worker, what knowledge I think they need, I definitely think they need to have a working knowledge of legislation. When I say that, I mean how it actually works in practice. Because we trip people up. Connection. So things around like medication, you know, in practice, what that needs to look at. We need to not set our staff up to fail. So they have to have the right knowledge in a way that makes sense to people in practice. So things like medication capacity, human rights, looking at sort of safeguarding health and safety, all of those practical knowledge-based skill sets. And I think it's really, really important. The more we are expected to do as social care around clinical practice, for example, we're expected to do so much more than we used to 20 years ago. So that clinical knowledge is also very, very important. You know, pressure care and stoma care and catheter care. But I genuinely do believe that you've got all of those traits we've just talked about. The knowledge is something you can kind of give somebody, can't you? And we're very good at doing that, I think.
So a lot of the things you've talked about, so you know, the values and good communication. I mean, do you think they could lead to compassion and kindness? Do you think they're important?
You talked about the C's.
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the things that you've talked about lead to sort of having a compassionate worker and somebody that's thoughtful and genuinely cares about others and almost has pride in what they're doing as well. I think they kind of come as a bundle, don't they, really? I think pride and compassion and good values. So is that, when you're interviewing somebody for a new role, is that what you're looking for? You're not necessarily looking for qualifications or the knowledge, you're looking for those? I'm
looking for those C's, caring, compassion, conscience, you know, all those things.
Courage.
Yes, exactly. Well, like was it 5 C's? I get mixed up.
6 C's.
6 C's, 7 right.
Yeah.
So I think we should push those more and more and more. I think they are the biggest. If you are kind and compassionate and courageous and all of those, what are they, Ray? What are all 6 of them? Can you remember?
I can't remember the others now off the top of my head. Should be able to reel them off, but
isn't it? You can't. I think we missed a trick with those because I think they are things that we could put through in our job packs, in our interview process. It could be a real golden thread in terms of what it is that we're actually looking for. If you've got all of those qualities, then you are more likely to engage in everything else that comes after the interview. You know, you're more likely to be you've bought into the whole process because you've got all of those qualities. So I absolutely agree, and I think possibly